We talked about the Vesamim and the candle, and prohibition of eating, doing. Let's go to chapter 9 now. Chapter 9.
Rough, you don't mind because something wrong with the camera. It cannot flip.
Really?
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Just do it this way.
Okay. Just take it farther away from you then. Take it even farther. Even farther. Even farther. As far as it goes. That's yeah.
But you look very small.
I look small?
Yeah.
They can go like this. No, they can zoom in. Whoever watches it, no?
Oh, okay.
All right. Sorry, we had some technical difficulties before. We went over the laws of Havdalah together. We're going to go on now to chapter 9, the principles of the Melachot. We said, where do we learn out that there's things you're prohibited from doing on Shabbat? No, prohibited. The prohibitions from the negative commandment, things you're not allowed to do. Where do we learn them out? Which word in the Torah? Shamor. Somebody said that. Yeah. Shamor, right? Shamor, that's guard, keep. So you've got to keep away from all the bad things, all the things you're prohibited to do. Torah says you're not allowed to do work. What kind of work are you not allowed to do? 39 categories. Very good. Very good. Because it's a very interesting definition. Some people explain you can spend all day long carrying heavy boxes from this corner of the house to the other, up and down the stairs, from the attic to the cellar, and you won't be violating the Shabbat. And then you can flick a switch, and we say, oh, you violated the Shabbat. What's going on here? What's called work? Which is more work? Obviously, the physical labor is more work than flipping a switch. So the usual explanation is that what melacha means in the Torah, it doesn't mean labor. It means creative work. Creative work like creation of the world. God created the world, right? And then in 6 days, and he rested on the seventh. It means on the seventh day, don't engage in creative work. Like God, he stopped his creative work after 6 days. And the seventh day, he rested from creative work. So how are we going to define what's called creative work? So obviously, my example of moving boxes, even though you're sweating, and it's nothing very creative about moving furniture from this place to that place. Just because you're working hard, that's not necessarily creative work. How are we going to define what is creative work? Can you say that in Chinese for me, Pinchas? Creative work. Stephen, help me translate that. Aaron. Cheng Sao? Cheng Jiao Shi? Okay, creative work, yeah. So how are we going to define what's creative? We have in the Torah a long description of a project that the Jewish people did, a very creative project. And in the Torah, the words used are very similar to the language about the creation of the world. When God creates the world, he speaks about all sorts of things that he made on the first day, on the second day, and the third day. And then the Jewish people together made something. What project did they make together, the Jewish people, in the desert? The Mishkan. The Mishkan is the tabernacle, it's usually translated. It's that portable Beit Mikdash. Before there was a Beit Mikdash in Jerusalem, there was a portable one, which the Jews had in the desert. After they came out of Egypt, God told them to create a Mishkan. And the language used there, when the Torah gives descriptions, it's almost one for one, a repetition of the creation process. So from here the sages said, and also it appears quite explicitly at the beginning of Parshat Vayakel in the Torah, that there's a list of all the things they made for the Mishkan. The list comes out to be One guess. How many?
39.
39 items that were made for the Mishkan. And from here, the sages defined for us, and then they go on and describe in great detail. We're going to learn some of those details. What are the 39 categories of creative work? What's called work? So, for example, lighting a match, lighting fire. It's not very hard, but it's definitely part of the creative process. Sewing, right? Both kinds. Sowing a seed in the ground and sewing with a needle and thread. They're both creative work. And each one of those is the 39 categories. So turn to page 141, and you'll see the list of the 39 categories of work. 142, actually. 142. Okay, Josh, you want to read them for us?
Okay. 39 melakot that were performed in the Mishkan and their derivatives. Melakot that are prohibited.
Let's go to the next page. And just read the list, I think, on page 142.
So, 1, Zoriyah, sowing. 2, Horesh, plowing. 3, Katzer, reaping. 4, Me'amer, gathering. 5, Dash, threshing. 6, Zore, winnowing. 7, Borer, separating. 8, Tohen, grinding. 9, Meraket, sifting. 10, Lash, kneading. 11, Ofek, cooking, baking. 12, Gozez, Zemer, shearing wool. 13, Melabin, laundering. 14, Menapets, combing wool. 15, Silvoea, dyeing. 16, Tove, spinning. 17, Mesek, warding. 18, Oseshte Bate, nearing, making 2 loops. 19, Oreg Shnei Chutin, weaving 2 threads. 20, Posea Shnei Chutin, separating 2 threads. 21, Kosher, tying a knot. 22, Matir, untying a knot. 23, Tofer Shtei Tefirot, sewing 2 stitches. 24, Korea al Menat, lit 4 Shtei Tefirot, tearing in order to sew 2 stitches. 25, Tzatzvi, trapping. 26, Shoteh, slaughtering. 27, Mavshit, skinning. 28, Mole'a, Me'abed, tanning. 29, Mesartet, marketing. 30, Memahek.
Not marketing, marking.
Marking.
Marking, yeah.
30, Memahek, smoothing. Marketing.
Yeah.
31, Mehag Tek, cutting. 32, Kotev Shte Otiot, writing 2 letters. 33, Mohek Al Menad Likatov Shte Otiot, erasing 2 letters in order to overwrite them. 34, Boneh, building. 35, Soter, demolishing. 36, Mekabe, extinguishing a fire. 37, Mav'ir, lighting a fire. 38, Makeh Bepatish, applying the finishing touch. 39, Motzi Reshut, carrying from one domain to another.
Amazing. Amazing. Well done. Here we need a song. Stephen, maybe we'll use the Wellerman, or what's it called? The Wellerman? Willerman. We have to put these 39 categories. Who can say them off by heart is going to get a prize.
Next week?
Sure. 39 categories. I think I can do it without a song. I can do it because there's categories. If you notice, the first 11 about baking bread. They all culminate in baking bread. So obviously you have to plant the seeds, plow, reap, gather. This is all agricultural melachot from 1 through 11. 1 through 11 is one category. It's easy to remember because it's a process which goes one to the other. And then you have clothing. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And 21 and 22, they're all, and 23 and 24. The next category is also is even 13 malachot, where you have dealing with textiles, clothing, how to make them, how to fix them, and all the activities involved. Then we have trapping, and that's like hunting, skinning, tanning, marking, smoothing, cutting. This is all preparing the leather from animals for writing. So it's another category. Writing and erasing. Okay, so we have in the next category from 25 to 33 is another category. 34 and 35. And then we have a few pairs. The pairs are boneh and soter, building and demolishing. Lighting a fire and extinguishing a fire, 36 and 37. Finally, makeh b'patish is the finishing touch, and the strange one about caring, which we mentioned the other day. These are the 39 categories. They are called avot melacha. Ava, what's Abba? Abba, Av, father. So what does it mean that these categories are called fathers? What does this imply? What does this imply? If there's fathers, then there must be
Sons.
mothers and children. Right, more descendants. In other words, there's subcategories. They're called toladot. Where does he say? Yeah. Toladot, the next sentence there. All right? They're both prohibited from the Torah. The ones which were actually performed in the Mishkan are called an Av. The other ones are called Toladah. So these are definitely categories. Okay. Yes.
How writing is related to the tabernacle? Is that writing Torah?
No. The sages say that in two places they would write. The tabernacle was built, it was portable. They didn't have these big, massive walls which carried as a wall. They made walls out of beams, which they put next to each other, like, one, and then another one, and another one. And then they attached these together, like my hands are holding them together, and that was their wall, okay? So when they wanted the beams, wood is, it's very flexible. Wood warps and changes over time. And it's very important when you're taking down and dismantling, and again, building a wooden structure like this, that the beams stay the same ones. You don't try to, mix and match. Next time when you dismantle and rebuild it, you'll put one here. It won't work good. It'll be like this or like this, and it won't be. So that they would write letters on each beam. This is, they'd write maybe on one side of it B, and here they'd write B, and they know, B and B goes together, and here they'd write X and X, and they know that they actually used of course, the ancient script. But writing letters was part of building the Mishkan in that way. They had to write letters. Also, writing letters, I think there was another case where they said you had to have written letters. Well, you had letters on the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol, and the names of the tribes of the Jewish people were on the shoulder rocks. Like this Kohen Gadol had a special garb with rocks on his shoulders, which had the names of the Jewish people, 12 tribes. All again back to the Parsha, the tribes getting together, the unity. The Kohen Gadol has to represent all of the 12 tribes, Yosef, Yehuda, and all of his brothers. Okay, other questions about the 39? Yeah.
Can we tie shoelaces?
Yeah, good question. Shoelaces. So you have to be careful when you tie your shoelaces to not make what gets defined. Again, each one of this, there's a chapter later on. We're going to go over the details. But in general, it's only called a knot that's forbidden by the Torah if it's a double knot. If you do one tie and then another tie. But what most people do in their shoes is one knot and then a bow, or a bow tie. That's not prohibited. That's not considered permanent. It's easy to pull out. It comes out easily. The double knot already it can stay for days and weeks, and maybe even years. Sometimes I have a double knot in my shoelaces. It stays there for years. I can't get it out. But so you have to know how to tie your shoes on Shabbos. Got to make sure you're not doing this prohibition of tying. And what else?
And also your tzitzit, to have your tzitzit is a little bit loose. You cannot.
Don't tighten it on Shabbat. That's right. Shabbat's not the right time. The other 6 days, fine.
Because every moment it goes like a little bit.
I can give you some tips on that. How to keep it together. Glue. Yeah.
When I study Torah or the explanation, I wanted to write down what I think the all
new thought, but
Not on Shabbat.
Shabbat.
Not on Shabbat.
But I think the whole Shabbat intention is to have Hashem, but the new sort of study Torah, the no argument, no violence.
I hear. The question is, how do we define what the Torah wants from us on Shabbat? The way of thinking of the rabbis is that we need a set of rules, of definitions of actions which are permitted and actions which are forbidden. And those actions get defined in a very, very careful way. So what you're intending to do, whether you're doing it for a holy purpose or for a mundane purpose, doesn't really matter. Once the act is called creative work, what's the word in Chinese again? Once it's called, this type writing is considered to be a creative act. It's forbidden for any purpose. For any purpose. Because the Torah has a practical, very objective definition of the type of work. So writing is forbidden for any purpose. Even if you say, oh, it's for the sake of Shabbat, you're not allowed to write. Because it's creative work. It's creative work. God says don't do any creative work.
New thought, no.
How can you think on Shabbat? That's creative. Good question. How can I talk to you? We're creating a relationship. How can, what else is, can I write a poem on Shabbat?
No.
It's creative. I can, in my mind, yes. But the action, the 39 actions get defined as forbidden. Creativity is good all the time. On Shabbat, many times you have insights and creative ideas and songs which you make up. It's all fine as long as you don't do a creative act. The act is writing, okay?
Write it in your heart.
Write it on your heart, absolutely. And many great rabbis, the minute after Havdalah, you know what they do right after Havdalah? The minute after Havdalah, they didn't go take a smoke. Or they didn't, no, but what after that? They didn't go turn on the TV and see what's the latest news. You know what they did? They sat down to write down all of their Torah insights all over the entire Shabbat. You might have heard of a great rabbi. His name was Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. You know what I'm talking about? He is a nickname. What do people call him? The Rabbi. The Rabbi. He was the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Lubavitcher Rebbe would teach on Shabbat for hours and hours. Beautiful Torah insights. There was a group of people. A few days ago, we heard one of them. He gave a lecture here. Rabbi brought in his recording. His name is Rabbi Jacobson. For years, he was a student, and his job was to be the mental tape recorder. And after Shabbat, his job was to write down everything that the Rebbe said in his hours and hours of Torah lectures on Shabbat. It was amazing training to train your mind to memorize everything, all the words of Torah, which they couldn't write down on Shabbat, but they wrote it down right after Havdalah.
Wow.
Amazing. It's called a chozer. The chozer is the repeater, the person who could repeat. Or there was a group of them, and they would compare notes, and they would, amazing talent. But yeah, we don't write on Shabbat. But to be creative in our minds and in our speech, of course, it's a wonderful thing. It's not the act. The act that gets defined as 39 categories of work. Those are acts. Yes. Mechabe, extinguishing a fire. Yes. Number, what number?
Number 30.
36, yeah. Yeah, what about it?
Well,
Why? That the Talmud asked the same question.
Cannot.
What's creative? In what circumstances is extinguishing a fire a creative act?
It's very creative. Depends how big the fire is.
Not extinguishing it.
Depends how big the fire is. If you have a forest,
That's just saving. That's saving a forest, but you're not being creative. It's a very good question. The Talmud discusses this.
But
Where do you have a situation where putting out a fire is part of creating something? There's an answer. What's the answer? You all know the answer.
In the evening when everyone leaves, they need to put the candles off maybe.
That's just to save money. That's so you don't waste your oil. But when do you light a fire, light a flame, and then extinguish it right away?
Like a Lucifer. You know Lucifer?
What is Lucifer?
the
Matches.
matches.
What about them? What about them?
You do it on, like this, and you right away you turn it.
No, but so you're just putting it out because you don't want it to burn the house down. In the olden days, this in the Beit HaMikdash, and until today, some people until today, depends on what wicks you use. Right? We just lit Hanukkah candles. Sometimes it's hard to light at the beginning. Right? When you just try to light the wick, it doesn't have so much oil in it. And it could take a while. You could be standing there with your candle, trying to get it lit for 30 seconds, right? So there's a trick. If you want it to go quick, you pre-light the wick, you burn the wick, and then extinguish it. So then the wick is easier to light afterwards.
We are allowed to do that?
Before Shabbat.
Yes.
Before Shabbat, yes, of course. It's a mitzvah even. I said before that I participate in my wife's candle lighting by setting up the candles. Many times, I know I use candles that have a wick which has wax around it. It's very easy to light. But other people, they pre-light the candles for their wives so that the wives will just put the match there. In an instant, it lights. It's called hatavat hanerot. Tov, Machon Tov, making the candles good, making them better. You all know, have you ever had a barbecue?
Yes.
Before there was a gas barbecue, what did you use?
Still coals.
Coals. What are coals?
Things will not go out.
There's pieces of wood that were burned and then extinguished. And then they sell them because they light easier. If you just take a chunk of wood and you put a match to it, then it's not going to light. But if you put a chunk, a coal, which is wood, which was burned, charcoal, it lights easier. So that's a creative act with extinguishing it. When you're creating the good wick, or when you're creating charcoal, the extinguishing is part of creating the charcoal. It's so creative that you can make money off of it, right? People sell charcoal. What did they take? They took wood and they lit it on fire. It's not sellable when it's on fire. They extinguish it at the right time, and then you have charcoal, which is very easy to light. So we found extinguishing, which is creative, and only that type of extinguishing is forbidden from the Torah. Now we have to move ahead. Everything we've been talking about up till now is on the level of biblical prohibitions, right? The 39 categories of work, the negative commandments from Shamor, this is biblical. There's additional rabbinic laws of Shabbat. We mentioned oneg and kavod, but we also mentioned there's other laws. There's another category I'm adding right now, and that's called Shvut. Shvut is a word which means rest, from the word Shabbat, right? Shabbat. But it's a technical word which refers to rabbinic prohibitions on Shabbat. And the rabbis came along and said, you're right. Really creative work with extinguishing a fire is in rare cases. When you're making charcoal, or when you're lighting the wick and preparing it for relighting. But rabbinically, we forbid any extinguishing of the fire, even if it's to save, okay, people are leaving the house, so you can turn off the candles now. You don't need them. You want to save them, so you'll have it later. That's not the original intent. So it's only prohibited rabbinically. But still, there's lots of rabbinic laws, and we keep all the rabbinic laws, not only the biblical laws. So extinguishing rabbinically is very common. You have to be careful not to put out the fire, unless it's dangerous.
Rob,
Yeah.
I don't understand you saying we can turn off the candle when we go out from the house during Shabbat.
Rabbinically prohibited. Biblically, there's nothing wrong with it because it's not creative work.
Yes.
But rabbinically, you're not allowed to extinguish the lights when you go out of the house on Shabbat. Okay? Also, electric lights, we'll get to it. We'll get to it in another chapter. So this is very important. I just added an additional rabbinic category, which is massive. Massive. There are many, many laws that are rabbinically prohibited, even though it doesn't fit into the rubric of the biblical prohibition.
Dus you can break rabbinic law on Shabbat. No, you can break it, but for example, you can break it without breaking a biblical law.
That's right. That's right. So you're not allowed to, but there is many things which are only rabbinically prohibited. And then the rabbis are going to say, well, if it's only rabbinically prohibited, I made up the rules. I can say when. I can be flexible. So if someone's sick, for example, rabbinically you're not supposed to take medicines on Shabbat. But if someone's very sick, you can take medicines without not getting into somebody with a danger of life. So what if it's a very big issue when you come to the laws of Shabbat? Is it prohibited biblically or rabbinically? And you can be more flexible in the case of a rabbinic prohibition.
31, number 31.
Yeah, 31.
The cutting. I wanted to make a salad. Can I cut the
Good question. Right.
vegetables?
Right, it's a good question. What about, we all start off the Shabbat, we make Kiddush, we have the challah, and what do? We cut the challah. How can we cut the challah? If number 31 says it's forbidden to cut. So the definitions of cutting, they're coming up. But it's goes back to the original context. The original context was preparing the skins for writing the letters on, and the cutting was cutting the leather to a very precise size. So you're not allowed to cut precisely on Shabbat. And also the size. So when you cut salad, it's better not to cut as small as you usually do on Shabbat. Also, by salad, you don't really care how big it is. It's not exactly 2 millimeters or 3 centimeters, right? Sometimes a little bigger, sometimes a little larger. So it's not prohibited because it's not precise to measurement. Cutting to a measurement would be the better translation. But there's rules about each one of these 39 categories. But it's a good question, yeah. How can we cut a salad on Shabbat? Some people say you should be careful when you cut the salad on Shabbat. Cut it a little bigger than usual, so that you don't get into the problem of precise cutting.
Also with cake?
Cake? It's a good question, I'll tell you. It's a good question. I'll tell you, there may be a difference also between a cake and vegetables. Because vegetables goes from the ground. And it's organic material. Whereas cake, it's processed, right? It's flour and sugar and eggs and water and oil. Not all of it is grown from the ground. So we're going to see that there's some differences if it's part of the those melachot. But yeah, we have to now look at all of our activities. You guys are asking good questions. How can I cut? What else here is be difficult? We don't bake, that we know. We don't cook on Shabbat. But we do heat up food. How do we do that? So we have to learn the rules of what, heating things up is rabbinically prohibited. We have to know how to do it.
And also trapping, I think I'm not sure how do you define trapping. If there are mosquitoes, bugs, flies flying on the food, flying over my face. So
Got him.
You're allowed?
Two problems. One is trapping,
slaughter.
and the second one is killing, slaughtering. It's what number is that? Number 15 and 16.
Yeah.
Both of them are Torah prohibitions, trapping them and killing them. It's a big problem. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. The best is to keep them away with screens or some chemicals like I showed you once, right? But on Shabbat, you can't kill bugs. You can't kill a mosquito. Even if it's bothering you, you can like shoo it away like this. But to grab it, no. To trap it inside a jar and take it to your science experiment in school, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. Of course, and what about your dog? If he runs away, right. You have a pet. So usually we assume that the dogs they come home, right? They know where they live. They're not considered to be wild animals that you're trapping from scratch, right? So that can be more lenient. But a wild animal, you're not allowed to trap them. Yeah, you want to say something?
For example, if you have a garden and you have like a chair that you sit outside, you take your chair and you move it about the ground. You make a mark in the ground. It counts as plowing.
Excellent question. You must have studied this to think of such an example.
I heard about it.
You heard about it, yeah. This is an example described in the Talmud, which introduces a very important principle. In addition to what we've been saying up till now, the definition of the activities forbidden on Shabbat, only these 39 categories of work, right? 39. But in addition, the rabbis limited your liability on Shabbat to doing the activities on purpose. It has to be intentional creative work. What's intentional in Chinese? Right, creative work was Chinsen Zhe, what was it?
Creativity, 创造.
Chenzao. And what's intentional? Now we're adding an additional work. Ku, gu, with a bu, G, gu, K, ku, yi. Has to be intentional. Creative work. So if you don't intend to do the work, it's not biblically prohibited. For example, you want to move your chair from one place to the other place in the garden, like Eitan is raising this discussion. But it just rained, and the chair is very heavy. And if you drag it, you know what's going to happen in the earth. There's going to be a channel. You're going to be digging in the earth. That's what plowing is. That's how you plow. You dig in the earth. You create a little shallow place so that you can put the seed in. So are you allowed to do that on Shabbat? You're plowing. It's number 2. Right? Number 2, choresh. You can't plow on Shabbat. The answer is, what's your intention? Ku-yi. Ito? In Cantonese? Ito in Mandarin.
The noun for intention.
Ah.
Intention is,
Okay, what you want to do. Right, so here, we have the Chinese discussion here. What's the right word for intention?
But the meaning is saying, for me, is saying just want to do.
What you want to do, right? You have to say so. So when you drag the bench from this place in the garden to the other place in the garden, you just want to sit down. You don't want to plow.
Yes, no.
So it's not biblically prohibited. Okay, it's not a problem because you're not plowing intentionally on purpose. However, the rabbis do make the distinction. They say, wait a minute. wait a minute. If it just rained, and this is a heavy bench, and you drag it in the ground, for sure, it's going to happen. You're going to be plowing. This furrow in the ground is going to be created. You can't play dumb and say, oh, well, I didn't want to plow. Because the next day, Sunday, say, oh, great, I have my field all plowed, and you're going to go put in a seed. So you can't play dumb and say, I don't know if it's going to happen, or it didn't happen. So if something's unintentional, it's not prohibited. But if it's unintentional, but for sure it's going to happen, like it just rained and it's a very heavy bench, so a heavy bench would be forbidden. If it's a light bench, a chair, and you drag it on the earth, maybe it won't create such a furrow, right? Maybe the ground is firm enough, so nothing will happen. So that's allowed. So there's a discussion now of each time you want to ask, is this action on Shabbat permitted or prohibited? We're not going to only ask what is the action, but we're going to ask what is your intention, koyi or kuyi or itu. What's your intention? Okay, so let me give you another example here. That was a good one, Eitan. That was a good one. Let me think of another one. I can think of another example here. Well, we already talked about the example of extinguishing a fire. That's why extinguishing a fire, if you're not making charcoal or fixing the wick, it's not biblically prohibited because you have no intention to do creative work. It's still rabbinically prohibited. But, okay, what else? What else? We have, yes, please, yeah.
Tearing.
Tearing?
Yes.
Yes, also.
Because I got children. The children, they have crackers or chips.
Right.
Ask me to tear for them. How do I do that?
It's a good question. When you're opening up a bag of potato chips, you're tearing the bag. More common, what's the biggest problem on Shabbat about tearing?
The words.
Not the words. What else? Another example.
Tearing the paper from toilet.
Exactly, the toilet paper.
Yes.
We all use the toilet every Shabbat. There was a friend of mine who had some fun with Bali Tshuva, who were just learning about all these rules of halacha, and they were discussing Yom Kippur. And he was telling them, Yom Kippur is coming and we don't eat or drink for 24 hours. And wow, they're saying, well, that's hard. How am I going to make it? You're discussing, if I drink a lot beforehand, I can maybe fast for 24 hours, 25 hours. Wow. And then he says to them, as a joke, he says, but really the hardest part is not going to the bathroom. They thought he was telling, as a joke, he was saying that, oh, maybe you're not allowed to go to the bathroom on Yom Kippur for 25 hours. That would be really too hard. So of course you go to the bathroom on Shabbat and on Yom Kippur. So what about toilet paper? Usually there's a roll, you tear it off. You're not supposed to do that on Shabbat. So the truth is, it's only prohibited rabbinically, but still we try to keep the rabbinic laws. Because the tearing referred to in the original type of tearing was when you need both sides. When you tear, for example, when you cut a wick into two, and then you have two wicks. When you tear the toilet paper, you're only interested in the one side, the part that you're going to use. And so it's only rabbinically prohibited. But in most homes that you go to, Orthodox Jews, you'll find in the bathroom cut toilet paper, pre-cut, or tissues. Kleenex.
Flashing water.
What about flushing the toilet? What's the problem? That's no problem.
Yeah, it's no problem.
No problem. Why would it be a problem?
Why wouldn't it be?
What category of work does it fit into? Moving water from one place to another place.
Spinning.
Spinning is with wool. Spinning is like creating thread out of fibers.
I forgot how you call it, for example, the blue color stuff.
Dyeing, right? That fragrance for the toilet bowl. It's a problem. Some people say you shouldn't use it on Shabbat. because you're coloring the water. Some people say there's no prohibition of dyeing regarding food, and water is food, even though it's in the toilet bowl. So it's a little bit of a quirky one. But dyeing is a problem. Some people say you shouldn't use those special color dyeing balls on Shabbat. But let's go back to the water. Why would flushing be a problem? It can be a problem. In most places, it's not. What's the problem? Moving water from one place to another place. What did we say? What's the last category of work? No, number 39. Number 39. Carrying from one domain to the other. So if the water goes into the tubes and goes outside of the city limits, in the plumbing, it might be carrying the water outside of the Eruv. Most places they don't have that problem. The Eruv, your house is within the house, the indoor plumbing is fine. But
But you live at the bottom of the city.
then you're in trouble. Yeah. You got to be careful. If you're outside without no Eruv and you got to take a pee, don't send it far away from where you are. You have only 4 amot, 2 meters around you. If you pee farther than 2 meters, you're in trouble. You're violating the Shabbat of carrying, because you're not allowed to throw. It's not only carrying, by hand. If you throw something outside, it's prohibited. So there could be problems, but flushing in general, it's not electric, it's mechanical, and it doesn't go far, so it's not a problem. And we have an Eruv where we live, so yeah.
You are allowed to do the dishes on Shabbat?
Good question. What could be the problem with doing dishes? Does it fit into any of the 39 categories of work?
Yeah, 2.
Which one?
Maybe gathering to gather the dishes from the table.
Good thought. The gathering, it's part of the agricultural series, right? 1 through 11, we said, is preparing the food for baking, the bread for baking. So gathering is more a problem if you were to scatter apples around the room, and then you gather the apples, it's organic material, that might be a problem. But gathering dishes and books, and that's not organic. It's not prohibited.
Laundry, maybe?
Which one? Laundering. Laundering is also, that's connected to the wool, to the textiles. So the plates and the dishes usually are, they're not made of material. But it is true that you're not allowed to launder cloth. So look at here, it's all dirty. If I were to take some water and soap and scrub it, that's laundering. It's prohibited. But washing the dishes is allowed. Only problem is the sponge. Usually you use a sponge which squeezes out the water, and that is called, it's a derivative of number 7. Separating. You separate out the liquid from the solid. So there are special sponges you can buy for Shabbat where it's not really absorbed within the material. And so when you squeeze it, you're not separating it out. But other than that, you're not allowed to use a sponge on Shabbat.
And the hot water?
Hot water is another problem. Why is hot water a problem?
Because if you use hot water, the boiler is going to work for you.
Exactly. Whenever you open up the hot water tap, in most homes, it's like that the water comes out of the tank, the hot water comes out, and what comes in automatically? Cold water comes in. Cold water comes in, and then it gets heated. And then you take out more hot water, more cold water comes in, and it gets heated. And so, by your taking out the hot water, that's no problem. But you're causing the cold water to get heated. And so when you turn on the tap of hot water on Shabbat, essentially you're cooking that cold water, which is going into the boiler. And so it's a problem to use hot water on Shabbat. So it's quite a problem. In Israel, it's a little easier. Why? Most homes, by law, have to have what kind of boiler? What kind of boiler do they have in Israel in most homes? Not a Shabbat boiler. No. On the roof of every house in Israel, what do you see? A solar panel. Solar panel. So the water that's going to get heated, it's going to get heated by the sun, not heated by fire. And that is not the normal way of cooking. Usually we cook with fire. So if you're cooking without fire, like by the sun, many rabbis allow it. Many rabbis allow you to use the hot water in Israel when you have a solar panel, heated water, but not in the wintertime. In the wintertime, there's not enough sun, so you can get into trouble. What most homes have is a dual system. In the summer, it gets heated by the sun, and in the winter, you flick the switch. Then it's electric powered, and there's an actual heating element in the same boiler, in the same vat of water. And so some rabbis said, well, this is just too confusing. Half the year it's allowed, half the year it's not allowed. It's just never use the hot water. I try not to use the hot water on Shabbat, even in the summertime. But in the summertime, if it's clearly been heated up by the sun and not by fire, there's room to be lenient. There are some rabbis that say you're allowed to use the hot water on Shabbat, and it comes from the solar heater. Yeah.
When you, for instance, in my house.
Well, invite me and I'll come to your house.
Yeah, I have electricity.
Yeah.
So to warm the water, I have a boiling system, the stove system.
Yeah.
But for this, I need to put electricity.
So probably you don't have. If even in the summer, you have to turn on the electricity.
No.
So that's what I was saying. That you have a dual system. Most people have a dual system. That if there's enough sun, you don't have to turn on the electricity.
No.
But if it's wintertime and there's not enough sun, then you have to heat it up with electricity. Right. So that's forbidden. And in what case, washing dishes, there's one other problem. Just answering Eitan's question about washing dishes. The dishes, it's no problem. The sponge is a problem. The hot water might be a problem, depends. And the problem is, why are you washing dishes on Shabbat? You should be learning Torah. You should be singing. You should be singing all the songs.
We have 3 meals.
Oh, you have 3 meals. What if I have many dishes?
It doesn't look nice.
Huh?
He doesn't want it to be smelly.
No, you don't want it to be smelly, and it doesn't look nice. Unfortunately for me and my kids, my wife says, I don't like it when the dishes are in the sink dirty. And it ruins my atmosphere of Shabbat. I can't enjoy Shabbat. And so for that reason, you're allowed to, because you're doing it for the sake of Shabbat. It's not for, I need the dishes clean for Sunday or Monday. You need, and usually, of course, Friday night, you need them for Shabbat morning. In the morning, you need them for the afternoon. But in the afternoon, can you wash dishes? Well, if it bothers you, you're doing it for the sake of Shabbat. You want the Shabbat atmosphere to be nice smell and good vision, good clear view, beautiful setting. So that's allowed. But there's all the activities that you do, now we have to think. I'm teaching you to be halachic thinkers. What's the first thing you do? You look at this list. Try to think. Does it fit into any one of these categories? Is it? And we're going to learn more about each one. But if it doesn't, no reason it should be prohibited. It's only prohibited if it's one of these 39 types of acts. And then you think about what's your intention. And there's more rules that it has to be immediately happening, not second or third derivative. For example, let me give you one more example. I'll take your question first. I'll give you an example. Go ahead.
You are allowed to swim on Shabbat because it's with your pants is longer in the swimming pool.
Good. So usually laundering could be an issue, but what if you swim with a skinny dip? That means naked. Can you swim naked on Shabbat?
It's a mikvah.
No.
Why not?
But if you have private pool,
It's not any of the 39 categories of work.
oh,
It's a Shvut. It's a rabbinic prohibition. The rabbi said, if we let you swim or go into the water, what do many people do when they go into the water and they don't know how to swim? What do they have?
they drown.
Oh, that's bad. For sure. But to avoid drowning, what do? You use a float. You use a flotation device. You take a branch. You take a raft, and that is already violating the Shabbat. To tear off a branch. That's number. What number is that? Cutting off the branch from the tree. That's called reaping. Number 3, kotzer. And there's other. It might lead you to any of the other categories of work. But the actual act of swimming in water doesn't fit into any of the 39, so it's not biblically prohibited. But rabbinically, there is a prohibition of swimming on Shabbat, and even boating on Shabbat. Of course, it can be, it depends on the circumstances, but biblically it's not prohibited, but rabbinically it is, yeah. People who go to the mikvah have a special permission for the sake of a mitzvah. But you still have to be careful, because what happens when you get out of the water? Many times you squeeze, I don't have much hair, but people who have hair squeeze the water out of their hair. Or you dry yourself in a towel, and the towel is sometimes so soaking, you squeeze out the towel. All those are prohibited. That squeezing is separating and laundering, like you said, with the bathing suit, but also the towel that you're going to use. And so bathing in general is rabbinically prohibited. On Shabbat, there are some circumstances where it's allowed if you're very careful about the details. But we'll see that in a later chapter. We're going to see the details. Another question here? Someone?
Oh, in the privacy, the oneg prohibitions, there is?
Yes. The rabbinic prohibitions and the biblical prohibitions apply. This is sort of like what Pinchas asked. No matter what your intention is, I'm doing it for the sake of Shabbat. My Shabbat enjoyment is to turn on the TV and smoke a cigar and drive to the beach. This is what gives me delight. Oneg, it's a mitzvah. I'm doing a mitzvah. You can't ignore the 39 categories of work. When you turn on the engine of the car, what happens? There's a spark plug, and then there's a fire and combustion engines, right? And every time you put a foot on the gas pedal, more oil gets burnt up, gas. And when you put your foot on the brake, what happens? The lights go on, the brake lights. So you're turning on lights. So driving on Shabbat is not allowed because it fits, even though I love driving. It's what brings me enjoyment. You can't violate the categories of work, the activities, even if it's for the sake of enjoyment.
Some people say jokes.
Saying jokes is good. I like jokes. What's wrong with jokes? It doesn't. Do you find it in the 39 categories of work? I don't know of any rabbinic prohibition. There is a rabbinic prohibition to engage in reading material which has to do with business.
Oh, of course.
Business material, maybe you'll start to write things down, or your mind is supposed to be on holy matters. And so you could say, well, jokes is just silliness, and you should be using Shabbat for holiness, not silliness. It's true. But it's hard to, pin it down, because joking is part of a conversation. And if all day long you're going to be doing comedy, I think you'd be violating the spirit of the Shabbat, right? We said there's something called the spirit of Shabbat. But to tell a joke, I don't think it's so bad,
Rabbi, sometimes you get some newsletter or magazine.
Right.
They have advertisements, so we can read those.
That's right. Reading the advertisements on Shabbat is not allowed. You read. It's strange because they have a Torah lesson, and then an advertisement, and then a Torah lesson, and then an advertisement. And when do you read these papers? On Shabbat. So you have to skip half of it. But why do they put the advertisements on there? Because they know that nobody skips it. So some people say you shouldn't read any of these on Shabbat because of the advertisements. Advertisements is business, it's commerce, it's marketing. It's not appropriate for Shabbat. You have to be careful not to read the advertisements on Shabbat.
Riding a horse.
Riding a horse. It's very interesting. Also this, it's like swimming. It's not biblically prohibited, but rabbinically it is. Rabbinically it's prohibited. The rabbi said you shouldn't, you whip the horse. So you might take a branch down and whip the horse. So taking the branch down is biblical.
Yeah.
So this is a Shvut. This is a rabbinic prohibition to ride animals. And taking care of animals, it's a whole chapter. We're going to see the details.
But
Yeah.
you cannot, for instance, the game, you hit the ball.
Playing
Why
games.
not?
We have to look at which games and whether they violate any of the categories of work.
Right.
Teaching you to think halachically. We're going to see all the examples as we go through the laws. We laid down some basic principles today, and we'll continue B'ezrat Hashem tomorrow. We just ran out of time for now.
Tomorrow.
Ah!
Shabbos. Tomorrow.
Tomorrow, what are we busy with?
Shabbat.
Preparation. We said preparing for Shabbat is a din of kavod Shabbat. We have to honor the Shabbat. It's a rabbinic mitzvah. To honor the Shabbat, we have to prepare. So no class tomorrow. Sunday, B'ezrat Hashem. Sunday.
If you see what you cannot do, then you realize that so you should prepare because then you have enough time to all those things.
That's right. Sure. Okay. Stephen, will you turn off the video, please?
If you want to say about the life.
Oh yeah, please everybody take one more look. We have an example brought in. Well, yesterday we talked about the Shabbat lamp, and Binyamin brought it in for us. The lamp is on. You see it's on. It has to stay on all Shabbat. And the way we turn it on and off is here. You can see it's a physical cover. It's not off. It's on. You just can't see it. And that's why it's a Shabbat lamp that you can use on Shabbat. You can move this. It's a LED light. It's not a problem. Most poskim say you can even move it. But it's always on. You can't turn this switch on Shabbat. This would be forbidden. But if you leave it on the whole 24 hours and you just put the cover on top.
There's a timer? No timer.
No timer. No timer. You just put the cover on and off. It's a lovely device that you can use for, it's a trick. The light's not really off, but you get darkness. You get darkness versus light.
Can you cover it with a piece of cloth, something?
Yeah, sure. Sure, you could put a cover with cloth.